It's been said that talk is cheap. Actually, talk is expensive. When you talk too much, when you interview during the hiring process and during different parts of it, it completely undermines it. Now, this may sound like common sense, but common sense isn't all that common sometimes. You see way too much talking at way too many stages of hiring, even though people most likely know better. And let me give you an example where this happened. A large biotech company that has a culture of pride. It's part of their core values. They take pride in what they do. They proudly share with others. During phone interviews, they spend a lot of time describing what they do, how they do it, and how proud they are of it. Same thing in face-to-face interviews. And then when they talk about candidates afterwards, they talk a lot about those candidates and did they fit and will they fit into the culture. And this company, as I started working with them with my hiring process called the Talent Accelerator process that's featured in my book, High Velocity Hiring, one of the things I realized immediately before we implemented this process is we had to cut down their talking because it was completely undermining so many things. I'll tell you about some of those in a minute. But let me tell you what we did. We just cut the talking in half. That's what we said to managers. We wanted to make it simple. Just talk half as much. So the executives that were talking to senior level managers that were going to report to them in phone interviews, they had to talk half as much. Hiring managers did the same thing with line staff and so on. Half as much on those phone interviews. Half as much also in the face-to-face interviews. And a couple other points in the interview as well. Here's what happened. Cutting talking in half, just that, put an immediate dent in how long it took to fill jobs. Time to fill was cut in half just from doing this. And why wouldn't it? It was taking less time, but also people were missing less detail because they were letting the candidates do more talking. They were letting the candidates share more and give more samples of their work. The other thing that happened was involuntary attrition was cut by 2/3. And again, why wouldn't that happen? They were making better matches because they weren't dominating the conversations. Instead, they were getting to know their candidates better. So now, what are the steps that we did at that company to make all that happen? Let me break those down. There's 3 of them. Number 1, they cut down their talking in phone interviews. I told you it was half. I don't know how much it has to be for you. It might be half, might be more, might be less. The rule of thumb is you should be asking mostly questions tied into your hiring profile. I call that a hire rate profile in my book. And your questions should be centered on some of the key attributes there. You should be asking questions like, opening questions like, why us? To understand what's motivating them to come to you. So half as much talking or more or somewhere along those lines in phone interviews, that's the first step. The second one is cut down the talking in your in-person interviews. Especially if you're what I call the teller hiring style. There's an entire chapter in the book on that. You like to tell people what to do. You like to give direction. You like to inspire people. But you're not the only one who talks too much. A lot of leaders do. You might want to talk a lot about your company and why it's such a great organization. Cut that out. Cut it down. Instead, you need to see the candidate do sample work instead of talking about doing work. Have them do functions, sample functions that they might do on the job. If they get to experience the job, then that's valuable. You get to see them in action, not all this talking that gets in the way of truly identifying a good fit. And then the third step, and this one may surprise you, is don't talk so much when you're discussing who to hire. Look, if you have a good hiring profile, if you've conducted good interviews where you see candidates do sample work, it's going to be pretty clear cut. There's not a lot of debating and going back and forth and having to pontificate and ponder and wonder. No, you can make pretty clear-cut decisions pretty quickly. So you know what? You can't talk your way into good hires. Talk is expensive. You can only act your way into new hires. And the way you do that is cut down on the talking, instead have experiential interviews where you see people do sample work, let the candidates do more of the talking, get out of the way so you can see that person and make sure they really fit you. If you do that, your time to fill is going to drop, your involuntary attrition is going to drop as well, your productivity and other things are probably going to climb. The list goes on when you just do this simple thing of cutting out a lot of the talking in your interviews.